So I'm going to introduce your four distinguished guests, or panelists, sorry. So we've got Bret Kean. Bret, can you put your hands up for us, please? Yeah. So Bret is a cloud solutions architect at the DMW Group. He has worked in global technical organizations like Microsoft, Cisco, Vodafone, and IBM, architecting and designing global networks. Right. Next we've got David. So David Labro, he is Director of IT at First Data Corporation. He has 20 years of networking experience, mostly in global financial institutions. Next, we've got Roger Perkin. That's all right, don't worry about it. That's all right. Roger is a network security consultant at Softcat. He has been designing and building large-scale networks for the last 18 years. And we've got Andree, who you've heard from before. He's manager of network engineering at Cisco Cloud Infrastructure Engineering, formerly OpenDNS, where he's responsible for all aspects of network engineering for Cisco Cloud Infrastructure and Cisco Cloud Security. He is also the founder of BGPMon. Okay, I guess we can go straight into it. First question is, are vendors cooperating to develop interoperable APIs? I think it'll probably be interesting to see what Bret's got to say about it, because you've probably got a breadth of experience in this.
Yep. That's a really good question, and good evening. I think, yeah, absolutely, vendors are realizing that the world of open is the only way to work. There are nuances that do appear across platforms, and I think, when we say platforms today, we're predominantly looking towards public cloud, as well as maybe on-premises components, appliances, integration devices, and so forth. But predominantly, I would say that vendors are certainly cooperating, and there are lots of examples where technologies start as open source projects, they get adopted by a vendor, and they get spun back out to the open source community. I think Hadoop is probably one of the finest examples in that area, and so yeah, I think that's really pretty much how I see things.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Yes.
I mean, just adding on to that, there's always going to be differences in the hardware, and I think what's filling the gap in now is software that is being developed where you're abstracting the actual specific manufacturer's commands away, and you are just going to be configuring what you want to do. So I think Napalm is a great example. Just to take what you want to do and just to push it to the devices, irrespective of what they are. So I think in a very short space of time, everything will be joined up to that nirvana of network automating everything.
So to kind of bring in, to offer like a little bit of a contrarian viewpoint, are things like Napalm really an example of vendor cooperation? Because they're more open source projects, right? So, anyone got any opinions?
Yeah, it's just trying to fix a problem. Yeah, the vendors. To answer the first question, it's not a vendor cooperation, it's a fix to a problem without vendor cooperation.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I guess actually it's I think vendors, including Cisco, all of them still have to come a long way. Different platforms have better support than others. Most of the things that we're looking for is always atomic commit operations. We find those the most important ones, and those are the ones that we talk to. Those are the ones I talk to internally when we talk to some of the Cisco product teams. It's like, we don't ask for much. All we need is reliable atomic commits. That's mainly what we need, and then maybe wrap it around netconf and some kind of other API. But that's really the most important thing for us.
All right, so the next question I want to put to you is, with ACI, will there be a need for firewalls in the future? So I think, Roger, seeing as you're a security consultant, maybe you can weigh in on that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept of, do we need firewalls anymore? And ACI is one example of abstracting that firewall away from where it always sits at the top of the network and placing it in front of every single smaller device. And VMware NSX is another example where we are making the decisions now to remove the firewall away from the single point of the network. So I think to answer that question, yes, we will see a point where there are no edge firewalls as such, and security is just a service that applies just across the network.
So if I can get Bret's take on that, how do you see firewalls working? I mean, is they say something that you're using, and if you're not, if you are, why? If you're not, why not? And where do firewalls come into it?
Yeah, I think in a sense the way that platform development, virtualization of services, if we look at it in that way, have really accelerated, right? And innovation is almost leapfrogging per week. And in a way, security has evolved, but I don't think it's evolved as fast as some other services. I think if I turn to our Cisco colleague, some years ago there was a project, Cisco TrustSec, which was a sort of a strategic view of looking at security in a different way, rather than enforcing perimeter devices. It was really looking at securing devices in the network, right? And so I think Cisco certainly did a lot of work in that area. So to me, I'm still looking for application-aware security procedures and strategies that can actually be built in an open sense into application code. So therefore, the way that we're looking at automating integration, continuous integration for application deployment and development, then in a sense we'll also build in security. And that's probably where I think we'd like to see things going, away from devices and code.
So I would say that one thing that I can see is a lot of focus in the code security, so inside the application, away from the infrastructure. So that's what you were saying to some extent. But then the question is it easier to manage a distributed, small device effectively, right? So a virtual environment that has less rules basically than a big box that's going to be a contention point. That's more or less the kind of model that we have at the moment. I think the complexity of with a large data center having big boxes in the middle just doesn't work basically.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. Like I don't. Well, the concept of firewalls will remain. The big boxes, you see them slowly moving away, moving workloads and all that kind of stuff. And there is already quite a few different, ACI being one of them, and almost a dozen other initiatives. So I think everybody's trying to figure out how to do this. But the traditional big box concept is probably going away.
Just a quick note, I've paraphrased questions that you put up on Meetup, so if you do hear anything that sounds like a question and you have an opinion that you want to be heard, or if you've got a follow-up question, then please put your hands up and let me know so I can come around to you. Anyway, I've got a great question next. With all that software-defined networking, do you think software is eating hardware? Come on.
Well, working for a vendor, I am afraid that's true. Yeah, I mean, the world is changing. Amazon's taking over the world, really. But there's always a place. I mean, at the same time, to allow for this giant scale networking, a lot of things we are seeing can't be done in software either. So certain things will be offloaded more and more to the hardware, whether it be particular NICs with specialized hardware in them that you can program. Everybody wants super high density, high performance switches, so there's still hardware dedicated there. But at the same time, some of the firewall things that we just talked about, they might move around. So I think things are changing, and it's a bit hard to say where it will end up. But there will still be hardware involved. But we are looking for ways to make program the hardware easier. And because that's always been the challenge, right? A lot of the network automation, when we talk about that, traditionally a lot of that has been really about configuration management and how do we push changes reliably everywhere. And that's always been a challenge. We have all this hardware, how do we react to it super fast and reliably and stuff like that. So we really want to just be able to talk to these hardware devices more as if they are software. And then you kind of get the best of both worlds.
I absolutely agree, and I think what's interesting is that perhaps we shouldn't be asking, is it a problem that that there is SDN and hardware, but rather how can we become more intelligent, you know. So if you take an example of a high-performance compute grid, you know, so institutions are now looking to cloud services to scale on demand and in time to move 100%. So really it's not a question of do we have to do away with hardware, it's actually let's control it more intelligently, automate it, you know, as we're seeing automation everywhere. And so then we have one environment, and that's just holistic across, you know, hybrid, which is a reality for many organizations, enterprise and global. So, yeah.
I would do an analogy with the server side. So super cray, supercomputers, all specialized hardware capable of doing a lot of computation at the same time. Centralized firewall we talked about, specialized hardware, offloading to different links and different cards for some of the specialization of SSL termination, things like that, for example. Or PC and multiple devices of standardized type of hardware over which you put whatever software you want. It seems to be more going in that direction because that scales better than a central box with specialized hardware. I think that's, I would say, ASIC or no ASIC, more the question here. So I guess, although Cisco for ACI have a different kind of take on that, but ASIC might not be the way to go. It might be more standardized compute chips, basically, over which you can put whatever software that you want for the functions that you want to perform.
I just add the software isn't going to eat the hardware. There will always be a need for hardware. We always need something to go into, but what we're trying to work towards is abstracting that control away from the device and treating the network as a service, which will be controlled by the software. So the software will be in charge of the hardware completely. That's where I see that where we should be trying to get to.
So anyone got any? Okay, there you go.
At what level do you think that a user, if the software and hardware is being split essentially, at what level do you think going forward, obviously it will depend on your environment, going forward would the user want access to the different components in the hardware? Because for me personally, I don't really know much about the hardware, but I've been in a number of talks and meetings where people go very in depth about what they want the hardware to do, and they're not able to do it. So with the hardware and the software being split, at what point do you think the vendors will actually let people do as much as they can to the hardware without essentially giving them in a box and saying, you know what, do it all yourself?
Interesting question. Who wants to take it?
So I think your question is sort of touching on the whole white box networking thing, and what actually do you want your network switch to do? And the whole thing is to take away the brain power of that device and the decisions that device is making and just turn it into a packet shifting box and put the software on top. So do you buy a Cisco switch that's got everything there? Do you buy a white box switch that you can do whatever you want with? So I don't think there is going to be a point where you decide where you're going to make that jump. You just have to make a decision on how you're going to run your network. And I don't know if anyone else is. It's the ultimate question. You know, how do you run it? And if you've got the brains and you know what you're doing, you can take a white box switch, just plug it in and drive the software. It's why, you know, Google and Facebook, all the bigger entities are making their own hardware, because they can't keep up with what Cisco can churn out. They've got to go one step further and put their own software on top. So it just comes down to throughput, I think, and how much those devices can do.
I think you find some area of the business where that's already taken place in the past. So if you look at high frequency trading type of environment, people have been using video cards on machines because of their compute power just to do that, right? So I guess it goes more or less with what I was saying. it might be, I don't, I mean, I'm not in the manufacturer side, right? I'm on the end consumer client side. But I can imagine that it could be that you have standardized platform and then you load whatever software that you want on it. And it might not be that you need to have all the brains that in the world to actually do that, but you can have a package of software components that bundle together, works on all those platforms basically. That could be also a model.
Thank you. All right, so a bit more of a general question now. What do you think the future holds for networking, and where does automation fit in? Maybe a nice segue into what we're talking about just now.
I mean, did you ask what does the future of networking look like?
Yeah. What do you think the future holds for networking, and where does automation fit in?
I mean, like I said earlier, like automation is going to be everywhere. Like if we're gonna really do infrastructure as code, the programmable infrastructure, you know, this is the future, and this is what everybody is going after. And so I think for everyone, vendors and operators like ourselves, we got to get used to that, and that means we have to all learn new skills. And you know, many of you are playing with Ansible. We need to know how to parse JSON code or start working with things like Terraform. This is, I think, for most of the network engineers, at least the ones that I work with, this is what our days look like. And even APIs that we are now developing internally, where our engineers, you know, SRE teams and stuff like that, they're asking for very network specific questions. And we don't want to give them access to our gear because we don't trust them. And to be honest, they don't want access to the gear because they don't want to do expect scripts or netconf calls. They want to do Terraforms and all that kind of stuff that they're used to because they're spinning up clusters in whatever Amazon or wherever on your own platform. And the networking part should just be part of that Terraform script or whatever you're using. So I think for, at least in the world that I live, that's what our future looks like.
Does that mean Cisco is going to build an iOS driver for Terraform?
Yeah, so I should probably preface that, like, I don't work on the product side, like on the routers or switches. I help build the cloud platform, right? But I am very much a voice for many of you within Cisco that probably asks many of the same questions. Like, you know, I want atomic commits. I want proper diffs. I want, you know, all these things. And we're trying to push really hard. You know, I want to say for the community, but mainly ourselves, and I hope other people can benefit from that.
I would say that network automation is not a new thing. It's been around for a long time, and there is always the network guy that can write the Python scripts. Now, that is network automation. You write a Python script, it does a great job. People look at that Python script who don't know Python, and it's another language. What is it doing? Now with things like Ansible, I'm trying to implement Ansible every day in my work, and it's a logical, structured, easy to read playbook. And people are saying to me, can you write a playbook that will do this? And you can write the playbook, show it to them, and anyone that doesn't even understand it can read it and see pretty much what it's going to do. So I think everybody, if you're not already, you need to go out tomorrow and just try to start automating something, because it is going to be your job and the way things are going.
David, have you got anything to say on that? Because it sounds like your problems are different too.
So what I would say, one thing that it would be interesting in that journey is, because we're talking network automation, but we also mentioned that automation is going to be everywhere, right? So maybe speaking with some of the guys in your organization that are sysadmin or people that are software developers, and wondering what they think automation is going to be, right? We talked about continuous integration, automated unit test and code testing and all this kind of stuff. For them, it's already there. So I don't think there will be a pocket of resistance that will hold in the network spectrum that massive movement of automation that is all over the place, not just in the network realm. So that's, I think, the main point.
Yeah, I think there seems to be a not a chasm, but there's certainly a gap in the way that developers have adopted and embraced sort of public cloud platforms and using the tools and the processes to develop and integrate platforms and services to those platforms. And it's interesting seeing, my background is in network engineering and architecture, but not on the command line for many years. I'm focusing in architecture and public cloud and so forth. So it's really interesting to see now where networking is. Because today, if I walked out of the office in the project I'm currently working on, it's a digital financial project, and the DevOps team, for them, they are working with Jenkins, they're working with Docker, they're working with Kubernetes, and they're deploying. It's not how do we do it, it's how fast can we do it, So they've got build times from 30 minutes down to sort of 4 minutes for platforms, and that might be equivalent to deploying an OSPF hierarchy or a BGP network. And so I think what will happen now, you'll see lots of common tools that will be adopted by both parties, and in the end, I guess we'll see teams working more cooperatively together, sharing skills, learning skills, and probably have one team, dare I say it, that works across the platforms, right? Because if you extend SDN, it's automating services, and why would that be different if it's a server, a network router, a firewall, a load balancer? So that's where I sort of see things in a few years' time.
Yeah, I want to just say yes to what you guys both said. I think in networking, it's sad to say, but we're years behind to what our coworkers in Sysench and SRE, stuff like doing. So it's also really easy to cheat and just look what they're doing. And you can literally copy-paste almost everything they're doing. Like Ansible, those guys have been using it for years. Git, they've been using it for years. CI/CD, there's nothing new about that. It's very exciting for most of us, but we're just starting to get used to this and start to look cool what we did. But then I go talk to the guys that sit next to us, the SRE folks, and they're like, yeah. And so if you want to look see what the future looks like, that's what it looks like. Exactly what our coworkers and the other teams are doing.
Thanks, Scott. So I'm just going to ask the crowd, the people who are gathered here, if they've got a question before we move back to the submitted questions, just in case anyone's had any thoughts, or is there any burning questions you want to ask? Put your hands up if you do. Okay.
The answer is not very good.
No, I think people are a little bit shy at the moment. But, sure.
We had this question again previously. So, how do you convince your management to do all this stuff?
Right, so there's an easy answer and there's a more difficult answer there, obviously. So the easy answer is if you can't convince your management, move on, go to somewhere else, right? But the question you need to ask yourself before you do that, is it going to be different there? It's not necessarily the case. So I think the reality is if you go to a management position, you don't just make sure that it runs, you protect the business. And the business running is one thing, but changing may be also an impact on the business. Right? We talked about change management and how you convince people of the change management that you can do changes quickly and all this kind of stuff. So I think the reality is you still need to prove yourself. Right? Like you did when you started in your job, you had to prove yourself. So when you start to inject automation in your environment, you need to have some kind of a small-scale, manageable environment that you can prove it's working, and you have to sell that to your management. Right? Saying, okay, today we're doing like this. It's like you need to run it as a project, right? Which means with a project there is some kind of a business case behind it. It makes sense to do that, and that's the reason why. That's what we've done. Now we want to scale it up, and then you get funding for it. I think that's probably more likely to happen like that than, hey, let's just dump everything else, let's do automation tomorrow and see if it goes better.
Yeah, I will also have two answers. So the first one is, if you want to do network automation, and you can't convince your managers, you should come to talk to myself or Dana. And then the other answer is, and that's kind of similar, it's like the way it happened with us, is you take small incremental steps, right? Like you don't all of a sudden have everything automated, and then, as of Monday, we're going to do everything automated. That's not how it works. And if your manager has any common sense and is just like many of us, he probably likes all the benefits of automation, but he's also scared because all of a sudden things happen maybe unsupervised, or the cool thing of automation is you can do things consistently everywhere really fast, and we all have stories, and once you start doing more of it, you're going to destroy things really fast as well, sometimes by accident, right? So CI/CD becomes very important. That's a fascinating topic as well. So how are we as network engineers going to stage changes and test them, and not just unit tests, but full integration testing? Those are really fascinating topics that our industry will need to start figuring out. Very few people are doing this, and almost no one is talking about it. So I think those are topics that we can all still learn from each other. How do you spin up these giant virtual networks and test everything? And so I think that is probably what our management is probably most concerned about. Is like, they all want to save money and want you to focus on other stuff, but they also want you to not cause any outages. So if you can just convince them that you have all these. So we had a lot of our tools running in monitoring mode for the longest time. And said, hey, this event happens, I am going to do this, but it wasn't actually going to do it. And we just monitor it for a few weeks, and then we started at one site, and then 2 sites, and maybe 1 provider. Just generally create that confidence and report that back up.
I would say if you want to start, pick a task like provisioning or something that everyone has to do, and put a metric on that. How long does it take to get from here to here, and how many mistakes do you make? And then if you start to automate that, and you can demonstrate that this task, which normally takes you 4 weeks, has been brought down to 2 weeks or a week, and you've got a deployment sort of percentage success rate of 95%, you've got a valid metric to hand over to management to say that this is off production, but we've shown a massive increase in time management here, and start on the production and move along. But small steps, yeah.
I would just add one thing. We said before, automation is not just in the network. So if you go to your management and say, well, Google does it like that, yeah, okay, fine, but it might not be their environment that you're working in, so it's not going to work. But you may have other co-workers that are already doing automation in the way they do their work, and you can bring that into the equation when you discuss that with your management, because they will talk to other managers as well to understand, how did you do it? How does that work? So I think you can leverage the other teams in the company, not just stay in the network on that front.
Yeah, and I had exactly that conversation, and he said, well, if he does it, it's only 1 server. If you do it, it's the whole network. And so even though he's totally right, you can learn from that. It's just, unfortunately, as network engineers, whatever we touch, if we do something wrong, the effects tend to be significantly larger than if 1 or 2 servers go down. This is kind of the downside of network engineering. Nobody ever hears of you, and if they don't hear from you, you're doing your job really, really well, right? It's like the electricity company. If you go down, everybody's freaking out and hating on you. What I found with a lot of the automation things is we can now actually start focusing on value adds and provide APIs to other people. Creating VLANs or whatever you might be doing now become function calls, and people can start doing some cool stuff.
Thank you. So I'm trying to see whether we can work through all the questions that we've got today. Super ambitious, but what that means is I'm probably going to try and target people individually. So we'll just do like a quick answer, well, as quick as you can make it, and hand it back to me, and we'll kind of carry on. We've got 10 minutes, so let's try and work this. So Roger, this one is for you, because it sounds like you do a lot of work with Ansible. Someone is asking, how can you get the best out of Ansible?
Be quick.
Okay. I don't know. I would say just start using it, and explore the features, and join some communities that are using it. and you'll find that pretty much everything that you want to do has already been done before, or someone's got something very close to that. So to get the best out of it, you just need to start using it and exploring all that's in there, because under the hood, there's a lot in there that,
It sounds like you've got something to say.
Yeah. So with Ansible 2.5, there is a getting started guide specifically for network engineers. I have been working with Ansible to kind of review that, making sure that does make sense for a network engineer. So go and check that out. Also, the 2.5 has a network CLI module, which is specifically for targeting network engineers. They're doing a really great job to basically accommodate all the needs and features that we need. I think Salt is another great one for that, but these two seems to be the biggest one for networks now. Sorry.
Well, thanks, that's great info. All right, let's see what else we got. Yeah, I think only this one's probably for you. How did you transition from a pure operations to a network automation team?
Yeah, that's a fun one. So for us, it took about 4 years. So we were probably, like many other network engineers, a firefighting team and never had time to do anything decently. And we all know how to really solve the problems, it's just that we never got around to do it. And at some point we were just sick and tired of it, and we just say every Friday, and we called it Automation Friday, we hide ourselves in a room, and it started out with 2-3 people, that was the whole team that we had back then. We locked ourselves in a room, our managers knew about this, and they said, yeah, that sounds great, just do whatever you want, it's Friday. All the other teams, most importantly, knew about this, and they knew not to disturb us, unless, you know, there's a fire or something, but then it was like a real fire, not just your fire. And that's how it started, and that's how experiments started, and we, you know, what's the basic thing that we can do, and we did that, and you know, after a few months, you have quite a few days that you spent full time on it. A lot of that was just learning, like, you know, getting started with Python, and you know, what is a REST call, and all that kind of stuff. And then a year in, all of a sudden, we had a few API endpoints, and we could start using them for simple things. Over time, these Automation Friday projects sort of graduated in actual projects. And it was a bit of a happy moment where we said, oh, why can't we only do this on Fridays? Can every day be a Friday? And we said, yeah, let's pick 1 or 2 projects that we have a pretty good idea of what we're doing now. We've spiked on it several Fridays. This is going to become a real project. I don't know. And we started out, I think, with something very simple, user management. Like a lot of our users, we use SSH keys. They are statically configured on our routers. And you know, if you have a few hundred of them, then you might forget one. And so that's how we started. Create a simple YAML file, put all the users in there, and netconf them over or something like that. And so more and more of these projects, Friday automation experiments, turned into a project. So the thing that we just talked about earlier with the transit optimizer thing was an experiment, and at some point we said, this has real value, there's no reason why we should be doing this on Friday with a beer next to our desk. Let's make this an actual project. And now over time, like, I think there might only be, my manager asked me the other day, he said, how much time are you spending on sustaining the network, operating the network? And we ran the numbers and we were like, I think 25%. And the other 70% of whatever it was is project work. And if he would ask me that 4 years ago, it's like 100%. We have never worked time for project work. And so that's what I would say. So pick one day, make sure that everybody understands that that is your day or your team's day, and then some of these will graduate and become actual projects.
David, have you got anything to say?
No, I would say that what is important is to get to the stage where it's an actual project and you have an actual deliverables, because it helps you setting that going forward. So the experimentation is a good idea. I think there is a bit of a selling point to be done here with your management, because they might be going, nobody's managing my network, and all that kind of stuff. But you can be creative in doing that. You can also, you know, shield parts of the team focusing on that and rotate that, or finding a way to ensure that there's still somebody on the desk and still have people developing it parallel to that.
I'm going to add one more thing. Demos all the time. That's really cool. And because other people can see the value, and it generates a lot of enthusiasm in the teams.
That's a software skill, right?
Yeah. Again, yeah. So you can just steal all those things from the other teams.
I think we're out of time with that. Yeah. So yeah. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you to all our panelists for your time.